Hello and welcome everyone to our second 2021 summer webinar and open house regarding the abundance of nutrients in plant foods. In this presentation, we'll look at where you can get your iron and vitamin B12 on a plant-based diet rich in fruits and vegetables, as well as how to know your status of each of these nutrients via lab testing. Over the last 2 years, the theme of our summer webinar series was Transcending What's Trending, where we looked at issues like ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting, and how our immune system works in relationship to a whole food plant-based approach. For example, when you're not over-consuming calories, implementing one of the intermittent fasting strategies may not be necessary because you don't need to compensate for over-consuming that you're not doing. You won't be looking towards a ketogenic diet because you're already at a healthy weight. You won't have to overly concern yourself with your microbiome because you're already eating a very high fiber diet, including lots of prebiotic fiber that feeds healthy bacteria in your gut and allows for a healthy microbiome. Not that these subjects aren't fascinating and fun to study, we think they are, but they oftentimes reinforce the benefits of what we're already doing when you're really dialed into the healthiest approach to whole food plant-based nutrition. There is just so much synergy here, no matter what is trending or is not trending at the time. Now, where to obtain key nutrients on plant-based diets and how those nutrients work in the body seems to be perpetually trending. So that's what we're covering in our summer series this year. For those of you who don't know us yet, I'm Dr. Rick Dina, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Karen Dina in a few minutes. We're both chiropractic physicians who have been on the whole food plant-based path for 34 and 33 years each, respectively. Essentially, all of our adult lives having gotten started in late adolescence, and we're board certified and licensed in the state of California. We've hosted plant-based summits for the past 6 years, where we interviewed successful, healthy, long-term raw vegan educators and plant-based doctors to share with you how you can be successful on this path over the long term as well. We're also the authors of the Raw Food Nutrition Handbook, which you can see down here in the bottom right, as well as banners from our first 5 years of summits. This year in 2021, we had our Energy Reset Summit, where we branched out a bit further and had more of our plant-based doctor colleagues join us while still having many raw food educators as well. And there we are, your hosts. We're the developers and instructors of the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive plant-based curriculum that we're going into our 6th year teaching, and also the developers and instructors of the precursor to that course, the Science of Raw Food Nutrition series of classes that we taught for 10 years live in person. For those of you interested, we'll share more about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum later on in this webinar. Now, from this and from speaking and teaching at many conferences and events over the years, over the decades actually, we've become known for our thoroughness and our scientific accuracy. That is very, very important to us. Number 2, our ability to make complex subjects easy to understand. We make sure that you see the big picture of each topic and then how all the details fit into context so everything makes sense. We do this for each topic and to see how all the topics fit into the big picture to see a cohesive whole. Number 3, we're known for our encouraging approach that takes unnecessary hurdles out of people's way. I mean, it's tough out there today. No matter what you do, someone's there to tell you why it's bad for you. We hear things like starches aren't healthy, cooked food is poison, juices aren't healthy, smoothies are junk food. You can't get important nutrients like beta-carotene and lycopene from eating raw foods. There's no such thing as B12 deficiency, and all sorts of other myths. Some people even say lettuce is bad for you. But we won't tell you just that anything goes, because that's not accurate and doesn't get you the best results. But we'll put everything into context based on real science and the real life experience of ourselves, our students, our patients, and other plant-based doctors and their patients, and many people we've known in this movement over the decades. This way, you'll understand what's behind the claims and have confidence knowing that you're doing the right thing. We've also been told that we're very authentic, straightforward, and no nonsense, that we tell it like it is. We believe that when you're able to determine and then share what's most accurate about any topic, in this case plant-based nutrition, the results simply speak for themselves. And there's so much good news there. All you have to do is tell the truth. Now, I want to mention that sometimes people get concerned when they hear the term raw food. They think it means things like living on wheatgrass juice and sprouts, or eating an exclusively fruit diet while excluding vegetables, or something else that just sounds way too extreme. What we're really about is studying nutrition from an evidence-based, scientific, results-oriented perspective. And with this approach, it becomes clear pretty quickly that de-emphasizing animal foods and processed foods and instead focusing on whole natural plant foods has a huge array of synergistic benefits. Now, once you get into that realm and continue researching, investigating, and working with people, it starts to become clear that including an abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables in your diet is additionally advantageous for so many reasons. As you'll hear with Dr. Karen's history of fatigue, going plant-based helped enough to give her hope, but then going mostly raw really made the difference, and without exaggerating, really gave her life back and quite a bit more. You can sum up our approach by whole food, all plant, based on fruits and vegetables. Now again, within that framework, we are very inclusive and affirming, while at the same time encouraging people to derive as much of their diets from fresh fruits and vegetables as they can lovingly and comfortably enjoy. We're not going to make anyone wrong, though, for eating brown rice or chickpeas or steamed kale or broccoli. So no matter where you are on this path, if heading toward this approach sounds reasonable and desirable to you, better yet, exciting to you, that's great. Anywhere from just getting started to having been there yourself for many years and wanting further education and refinement that many of our students take advantage of. Before we continue, we'd like to let you know that the information and opinions expressed by us in this webinar are not intended to be used as medical advice and should not be used to diagnose or treat any medical condition or as a substitute for individualized healthcare. This webinar is presented with the understanding that we are not liable for misconception, misuse, or adverse effects resulting from its use. Any type of dietary change, nutritional therapy, or fasting should always be undertaken with the supervision of a qualified healthcare practitioner. Now, it's possible we may be those practitioners for you, but we want to make it very clear that watching this webinar does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. So let's take a look here. Each of our webinars this year and including in the past years have the same basic format. We start with a basic introduction, which we're just about covered with now. Then we go on to our backgrounds, and each year we have the same background. So in other words, for our 3 webinars in 2019, our backgrounds were each the same. For our webinars in 2018, the backgrounds were all the same. But the 18 webinars and the 19 webinars are different. Same thing for our class information at the end. That's the same for each webinar within the same year, but they are different from year to year. And then in the middle, we have different educational content for every webinar. If you go back and watch some of the previous ones, you'll see some of the same topics, and for some of them there's some overlap, but there's also some differences each time also. So our webinars are very, very educational. And then we'll tell you about our curriculum at the end. And for those of you here live, we have a live question and answer session, but it's not on the recording. So now that we've got the introduction covered, we'll move on to a few minutes of Dr. Karen's background.
I found raw food at a time when I was experiencing notable fatigue for which there was apparently no answer. I was in college at the time and I was sleeping 10, 12, and sometimes even more hours per night, and still waking up non-refreshed. I saw 3 medical professionals, and after multiple lab tests and evaluations, I had a diagnosis: fatigue of unknown origin. They had a whole list of everything that I didn't have, but could not pinpoint the source of my fatigue. I asked every single one of them if my fatigue may have had anything to do with my college diet and lifestyle. They all emphatically said no. Things really started to change, however, when a friend gave me a copy of a book that discussed vegan diets and the connection between diet and health. I also learned about the connections between diet and the environment and the way animals are treated. And with all these compelling arguments, I was open to giving this approach a try, and I became vegan. In addition to feeling good about eating compassionately and leaving a lighter footprint on the earth, I was so excited to find that my fatigue actually started to improve, despite what the so-called experts, in this case the medical professionals, said would happen. This personal experience opened the door to my thinking that diet really could make a difference in health and left me open to exploring other opportunities. When I learned about and implemented a raw food diet, my energy soared far beyond the impressive improvements that I experienced by eating vegan. Long story short, my fatigue vanished, along with a variety of other symptoms that I'd had for years, and I had more energy than I knew what to do with. I could not remember a time when I felt better. I started to look healthier and I slept better. I enjoyed exercising and my digestion improved. I was so inspired by the health results I was experiencing that I felt compelled to learn more about the inner workings of the human body, nutrition, and the diet-health connection. I really wanted to immerse myself in learning as much as I could, so I earned a second undergraduate degree in biology and then received doctorate-level education in naturopathic medicine and chiropractic, which helped me to put everything that I observed into perspective, and on a much deeper level. Over the years, I've refined and revised my approach to raw food and tailored it to my individual needs. And we can show you how to do this too. Next, Dr. Rick will share with you a bit about his background and experience with raw food and plant-based nutrition. So take it away, Dr. Rick.
Thank you, Dr. Karen, and hello again, everyone. In this webinar, I'll share a succinct overview of my background and history with plant-based nutrition. And if you'd like more detail and additional information, you can take a look at one of our 2018 or 2019 webinars. So growing up was the typical American food, and for the most part I was healthy, but I had a major issue every spring and a little bit in the fall with hay fever type seasonal allergy issues. I had a runny nose, itchy, watery eyes. I would feel totally drained of energy. When I got to college, I kind of gained the typical freshman 15, but I already had a pretty good head start from high school. And here is a picture of me. I was exhausted because I was having a bad allergy day. I took a nap in the back of my parents' car, and my mom snapped a photo. So as you can see, I wasn't feeling my best. I was very motivated to change. So in 1986, I started making significant healthy changes to my diet, and I lost 15 pounds of fat over the summer. And I was getting some exercise, as you can see, and I was feeling so much better. In 1988, I fasted for 14 days in my college dorm. Not the way I would recommend anyone does it, but one of the benefits of that was that the majority of my childhood allergy issues were gone. I was absolutely amazed at the healing power of the body. I just wanted to keep learning as much as I could. So books, tapes, magazines, went to conferences, events. So from a professional point of view, I went to work at Hippocrates Health Institute a couple years after I finished college. I taught one of the classes there. Then I went to work for JM Marketing, and I was part of the support team. And I would really enjoy it when I'd be explaining things to people who were out getting some of the juice samples, and a crowd would gather around and people are nodding their heads. And that reinforced for me that I really love teaching people about plant-based nutrition. So I wanted to keep learning, so I went back to chiropractic school to earn a doctorate degree. The level of depth and understanding about so many things I had learned about nutrition up until that point increased dramatically, going through especially the first couple of years with all of the science classes, putting two and two together, brought it up to a level that I'll have to say just wouldn't have been possible without that additional super intensive education. That afforded me the opportunity to earn an advanced degree, and then I went to True North Health out here in California to do an internship in medically supervised water-only fasting. Then I got to see hundreds of other people experience incredible health recoveries like I had with my allergies, but on a professional level. My girlfriend at the time was attending Bastyr University in the naturopathic medical program, and I actually moved up there to support her and be with her. And as you heard previously, you may have guessed that was Dr. Karen, so it had a happy ending. And when I was at True North also, I was involved with their study on water fasting and high blood pressure that Dr. Campbell was also involved with. So in any case, when I moved up to Seattle and Dr. Karen was going to Bastyr University, now I'm going to look more professional here, I taught a class there on plant-based nutrition, and that started to develop me putting together a curriculum, which Dr. Karen has joined me for, and that was some of the early inklings of that. You heard Dr. Karen's story, and then we started developing our Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum. We taught that live for 10 years. Eventually, we also updated and expanded and turned that into our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online curriculum, and that's been continuously updated as well. I have a part-time clinical practice working with people on plant-based diets. A lot of those people base their diets on fresh fruits and vegetables, and my clinical experience comes into play in our curriculum and vice versa, and it is really synergistic. Okay, so we've got the introduction covered. You heard Dr. Karen's background and my background, and now we're going to get to the educational portion of the program.
All right, so our first nutrient is iron. Now, iron is an element, and for nutritional purposes, we can call it a mineral. It's involved in a number of activities in the body, including the formation of red blood cells. And in red blood cells, iron is involved in carrying oxygen from our lungs to our tissues and carrying carbon dioxide from our tissues back to our lungs, where it can be exhaled as a waste product. Essentially, iron plays an important role in the oxygenation of our tissues. Now, sometimes when people are low in iron and they have an iron deficiency, then their body's ability to oxygenate its tissues is compromised, and so sometimes these people experience fatigue. Now, when I was experiencing fatigue in college, an iron test was one of the lab tests that I was given. As it turned out, I was not iron deficient, so my doctors looked on to other possibilities. Now, other functions iron is involved in with our body include energy production and immune system function, among others. Now, there are two main dietary forms of iron, as you can see up here on the slide: the heme form and the non-heme form. The heme form is found in animal foods and supplements. And when I say animal foods, I'm mostly referring to red meat. Now, different supplements I've seen contain the heme form of iron. So how I can tell is by looking on the supplement bottle or container in the ingredient list to see if I see the words ferrous sulfate. Now, that means that the supplement contains the heme form of iron. Now, the non-heme form of iron is the type of iron that is found in plant foods. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this, but many times I've heard people say that the iron found in animal foods is more easily absorbed than the type of iron that's found in plant foods. And my answer to this idea is this. It's a little bit more specific than that. As it turns out, the form of iron found in plant foods is what is called more selectively absorbed than the iron found in animal foods. And what that means is that with the non-heme form of iron, the iron status of the person affects absorption. So this form of iron is absorbed more readily when it's needed by the body and less readily when it's not needed, which is actually really good because iron is a really important mineral, but we don't want too much of it. By contrast, the heme form of iron is less selectively absorbed, which means that the body absorbs this form of iron whether or not it needs it. Having enough iron is important, but too much can be potentially problematic because iron is what's called a free radical initiator. And too much iron potentially can lead to free radical damage in our body tissues, in addition to other problems. Now, there are some substances that we find in some foods that can bind to iron and make it less usable by the human body. Oxalic acid, also known as oxalate, is one of those substances. Perhaps you've heard of it. Now, oxalate binds to iron and certain other minerals, making them less bioavailable to our body or less useful to our body. Oxalates are found in a number of foods, but certain foods are very high in oxalate, making them not good sources of iron. And examples would include spinach, rhubarb, Swiss chard, beet greens, and parsley. Now, it's important to note that these are not bad foods. They're just not good sources of iron, especially when they're raw. Many of these foods actually have a lot of iron, but most of that iron is bound to oxalate and therefore is not usable by our body. It's important to note that oxalate will not steal iron or other minerals from our body, so that's really good to know. Here's a table showing the oxalate or oxalic acid content of some of the foods that we just mentioned. And as you can see here, parsley, chives, purslane, spinach, and beet greens are much higher in oxalate than others that are further down on the table. See, there we go. Parsley, chives, purslane, spinach, and beet greens, much higher than the other foods that are further down on the table. Now, it's difficult to avoid oxalic acid altogether. Now, it's difficult to avoid oxalate altogether, but if we focus our diet on lower oxalate foods, less of our dietary iron will be bound to oxalate and will therefore be more available for use by our body for important processes such as the formation of red blood cells and assisting with carrying oxygen from our lungs to our tissues. Once again, focusing one's diet on lower oxalate foods, such as those on this particular table that we're looking at right here, can increase the amount of bioavailable iron in our diet. These foods are good sources of iron and are low in oxalate and would include kale, dandelion greens, broccoli, romaine lettuce, bok choy, and many others. The foods on this table are just examples. I mention them here because they are popularly consumed on raw food and plant-based diets. And I've seen people focus on spinach as their main leafy green without knowing that much of the iron in spinach is bound to oxalate. This is one of the reasons why I encourage people to include a variety of leafy greens in their diet, rather than just focusing on one or two. On this table, we see that 3 cups of kale contain 3.42 milligrams of iron, and 2 cups of dandelion greens loosely packed contain 3.14 milligrams of iron. These numbers are excellent. Now, if we compare these amounts to the daily value for iron, we see that they're impressive. The iron recommended dietary allowance for men and postmenopausal women is 8 milligrams, and 18 milligrams for premenopausal women. Now, some non-leafy green sources of iron are listed on this table. We see that chia seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, and hemp seeds also contain significant amounts of iron. An important thing to mention here is that nuts and seeds, while they do contain iron, they also contain a substance or anti-nutrient called phytic acid, also known as phytate. Now, phytate binds to iron, calcium, magnesium, and zinc in the food that contains them, making these minerals less available for use in the human body. Now, here's a slide showing the phytate content of certain foods. And as you can see, certain nuts and seeds and grains are the highest in phytate when compared to the fruits and vegetables that are further down on the table. Like, for example, if we take a look here, we see that wild rice, Brazil nuts, sesame seeds, almonds, walnuts, and cashews are much higher in phytate than the fruits and vegetables that are further down on the table. Just because these foods are higher in phytate does not mean that they're bad foods. It just means that they're not going to be our best sources of iron. However, this is where soaking comes in. You've likely heard that soaking nuts and seeds can help to release enzyme inhibitors, which is true. Additionally, research has shown that soaking also inactivates phytate. In other words, when you soak your nuts and seeds, you can decrease the phytate content of those foods, allowing iron to be more available for use by the body. In this case, soaking has a dual purpose: breaking down of enzyme inhibitors for improved digestion and the inactivation of phytate for increased iron availability. Here's how it works. Soaking activates the enzyme phytase in nuts, seeds, and grains, which breaks down phytate. Sprouting will also activate phytase. Soaking may also decrease phytate through the leaching of phytate into the water, into the soak water. In other words, not only does soaking inactivate phytate, it can also lead to the movement of phytate from the food into the water. Now, you may be asking yourself, how much of a difference can soaking and sprouting make in phytate content? This table shows the results of a study that compared the difference in iron availability between unsoaked, soaked, and sprouted sorghum grain. Now, I know that grains are controversial, so I'm not suggesting that one eat sorghum grain or any other type of grain for that matter. I'm just using this example to illustrate the difference in iron availability. As you can see, soaking and sprouting certainly appeared to make a significant difference, and other available research mirrors these findings. Now, to summarize before we move forward, we have seen that soaking and sprouting can be beneficial for helping improve availability of minerals like calcium and iron by breaking down phytic acid. By contrast, oxalate is not affected by soaking or sprouting. And most high oxalate foods are leafy greens, which do not lend themselves to soaking and sprouting anyway, so we suggest focusing on lower oxalate greens for iron. Now, we often hear that fruit is a good source of antioxidants and calories in the form of simple carbohydrates like fructose, but not much else. I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about fruit as being a source of minerals. So let's take a look and see for ourselves. As you can see here on this table, we have common serving sizes for a variety of different fruits. 1 cup of mulberries, dates, durian, blackberries, raspberries, persimmons, and so forth. And we can see here the iron content of those 1 cup servings. As we can see, if we compare it to the daily value, some of these fruits can be a notable source of iron. Now, it's interesting to look at the nutrient content of fruit in common serving sizes that most people eat. But what about the amounts consumed by many raw food enthusiasts? Let's take a look. So down here on this table, we've got 3 cups of blackberries, 3 cups of raspberries, 6 persimmons, etc., and so forth. And if we take a look at the iron content of each of these servings, we see that the iron can be quite significant when we compare that to the adult daily values for iron. And then for those of you who are interested in seeing a per calorie assessment, this table shows the iron content of various types of fruit per 100 calories. And as we can see, mulberries, blackberries, and raspberries are at the top of the table, followed by strawberries and apricots. So we're seeing a trend here The highest in iron content per serving and per calorie would include mulberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, and apricots. That's actually pretty impressive. So maybe we can change the conversation around fruit and iron content to certain fruits, like the ones we've mentioned here, eaten in quantity, can be notable sources of iron. Now, it's very interesting to see the nutrient content of individual foods, as we've looked at here, but how much iron do we find in foods when they're eaten together? We have an example here of a medium-sized salad that has 4 cups of romaine lettuce, 2 cups of dandelion greens, 1 cup of grated cucumber, 1 cup of grated carrots, and 1 cup of chopped tomato. And we have a simple dressing with a tablespoon of sesame tahini and 1 tablespoon of fresh squeezed lemon juice. All of these ingredients have a total of 9.3 milligrams of iron. This is excellent when we compare to the RDAs for iron. Once again, the iron RDA for men and postmenopausal women is 8 milligrams and 18 milligrams for premenopausal women. Now, from this salad and dressing, we have exceeded the iron daily value for men and postmenopausal women for just 277 calories. That's pretty impressive. Now, here's some photos of the salad and dressing. As you can see, this salad is sort of a medium-sized salad. Now, here's a larger salad with a few different ingredients. This is for those of you who like to eat larger amounts. We showed the smaller salad for those of you who might be new to this way of eating to show you that if you eat a smaller salad of the size that we mentioned, you can get a decent amount of iron. But what about if you have a larger salad? With this salad, we have 8 cups of romaine lettuce, 3 cups of dandelion greens, and similar to the other salad, 1 cup each of cucumber, carrots, and tomato. And then we have a dressing that is a little bit more involved. It's got some lemon juice, some red bell pepper, almond sesame seeds, zucchini, and chia seeds. So with all of the ingredients in the salad and dressing, what we see here is 13.4 milligrams of iron for 488 calories. As we can see here, this larger salad does have a significant amount of iron in it. And here's a photo of the salad with the dressing. As you can see, this salad is in a large mixing bowl. So from the 2 salads that we looked at here, we can see that both of them can provide a significant amount of iron. So you have your choice. You can eat a smaller salad, you can eat a larger salad, depending on what works best for you. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about vitamin C, because vitamin C has a reputation for helping iron to be more available or more absorbable. Now, as it turns out, many raw foods are excellent sources of vitamin C. So when you combine these foods with iron-rich sources, then that vitamin C can help that iron to be more absorbable. And in addition to that, a number of foods that are rich in iron are also rich in vitamin C, such as some of the ones that we have up here on the screen. Kale, broccoli, romaine lettuce, as you can see, a lot of the leafy greens, and then further down we have some of the berries. And then of course, citrus is a great source of vitamin C. So one strategy that you can use is to squeeze a little bit of lemon on top of your salad. And in addition to that, green smoothies are also a great source of vitamin C because the fruits that you put in there are often very rich in vitamin C, and then the leafy greens tend to be a good source of iron. But then again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of leafy greens are really good sources of vitamin C and iron, all rolled into one. And now Dr. Rick is going to share with you how to determine the iron status in your body by looking at the results of some common lab tests. So take it away, Dr. Rick.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll start with something called the complete blood count, otherwise known as the CBC. It has other names as well, though, depending on where you live. There are several components to a CBC, but we're going to focus on just the 4 that tend to be most important. First one is the red blood cell count, then hemoglobin, then hematocrit, and then the size of your typical red blood cell. And we'll see how all of those are very much related to each other. Then we'll follow up by taking a look at how to measure iron directly by measuring iron itself, as well as the storage form of iron known as ferritin. So we're actually going to start here by looking at hemoglobin, and again, as we go on, we'll see how it's related to these other components. So red blood cells are stuffed full of hemoglobin. We have hemoglobin over here on the right bottom. Now, every hemoglobin contains 4 heme molecules, and this Fe2 in the center is an iron atom. And we can see over here the globulin part are these protein strands that are wrapped around in different shapes. And there's 4 hemes, as we can see, this one's hiding back there in this hemoglobin molecule. So if you don't have enough iron, you can't make enough heme. And if you don't have enough heme, you can't make enough hemoglobin. And then if you don't have enough hemoglobin, you don't have as much of it in every red blood cell. And hemoglobin's main job is to carry oxygen from your lungs out to the rest of your cells. And when you don't have enough oxygen going to all your cells, including your brain, you feel lethargic, you feel tired, things don't work so well. So as far as iron content in the body, each one of these hemoglobins, as we said, has 4 hemes, which means there's 4 iron atoms in each hemoglobin. There are about 250 million or so hemoglobins in each red blood cell. And we have about 25 trillion red blood cells in the body. So it shouldn't be surprising to know then that about 2/3 of the iron in the body is in hemoglobin found in red blood cells. So if you are low in iron, your hemoglobin cannot be normal. And there's other effects of this, as we'll see also. Here we have a cutaway of a blood vessel, and we can see that there's lots of red blood cells in there. We can see some white blood cells also, and then all the fluid that's not shown here, but there's fluid in between the spaces of these red and white blood cells known as plasma. And within the plasma, we find glucose, insulin, other hormones like the sex hormones, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and other important things traveling through our bloodstream. So keep that in mind as we continue on here. Now we're going to take a look at some of those CBC numbers. There's a few extra here of a typical long-term vegan female. Red blood cell count, we can see, is in the middle of the reference range. That's great to see. Hemoglobin, just spent some time talking about that. We need enough iron to make hemoglobin. The level here is 13.2. Reference range is 11.1 to 15.9, so we're solidly in the middle. Hematocrit, what is that? We said here that there is a plasma in between these cells here, and that makes up our total blood volume. So the percentage of the blood volume that is composed of red blood cells, that is the definition of this term here called hematocrit. So 40.1 we see, 34 to 40, I'll round that up to 47 is the reference range, so we're solidly in the middle. And then also we have MCV, that stands for mean corpuscular volume, which translated into English is the size of your typical red blood cell. You see the reference range here is 79 to 97, and we're at 91, solidly in the middle. So I'll explain a little bit more, but these 3 numbers especially cannot look normal if you are low in iron. So we already talked about hemoglobin. Let's talk a little bit more about the relationship between hematocrit and the size of your red blood cells. So we're going to go back. So we said if you don't have enough iron, you don't make enough hemoglobin, and instead of maybe 250 or so million hemoglobins per red blood cell, you might only have 200 million or 180, or worse yet, maybe 150. So when the red blood cells aren't stuffed full as much hemoglobin, they get smaller. And so imagine if each one of these red blood cells in your bloodstream was 20% or so smaller. The total amount of space that the red blood cells take up in your blood would be smaller. So therefore, the red blood cell size itself would be smaller. So instead of 91 here, it might be 80 or 75 or something like that. And because they don't take as much room individually, the hematocrit is going to be lower too. So that might be down at 30 or 28 or 33 or something like that. So the bottom line here is that when these numbers look good, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and the size of the red blood cells, you know your iron status is excellent. A couple other tests we'll look at here. We can measure iron directly, and we can see that's at 50, and 27 to 159 is the reference range, and that's good to see. It confirms what we see up above. And then ferritin, that is the storage form of iron. And we can see that the reference range is 15 to 150. That's typical for women. And this long-term vegan is at 30. So that is near the lower end of the reference range. And that is normal for vegans to be at the lower end of that reference range, because plant foods contain non-heme iron, which is selectively absorbed, meaning if you don't need to absorb more, you won't. And that confers us some protection because iron is a pro-oxidant, the opposite of an antioxidant. So the more we have, the more free radical damage potential there is in the body. So sometimes I've worked with people and their doctors or other clinicians are concerned that they're going to be iron deficient because the ferritin number looks low. But as long as hemoglobin, hematocrit, and the MCV look good, no matter what iron or ferritin says, you know you've got enough, because these numbers, again, can't look normal if you are deficient in iron. Let's take a quick look at one more, a long-term vegan male. You can see that these first three numbers, red blood cell, hemoglobin, and hematocrit, I'll go back and forth a couple times. These reference ranges are different for women versus men. So this male happens to be me, right in the middle range for all of those. Size of the red blood cells is 91. So that's good to see. You know from those numbers there's enough iron there. And iron directly, as well as ferritin, I'm sort of an exception. My body seems to hold on to more iron than other people, hopefully not too much. And it's a good thing I eat a high antioxidant diet to offset some of the potential negative effects there. But I am solidly in the middle for ferritin and kind of near the upper range for iron. So there you have some of the basic tests to determine the iron status in your body. And next, Dr. Karen is going to share with you some important information about vitamin B12. And after she does that, I'll be back to tell you how to determine your vitamin B12 status with lab testing.
Now, vitamin B12 is known by its scientific name cobalamin. Now, it's essential since the body does not make it, and it's needed for important body functions, including the formation of every single cell in our body, because it's involved in genetic code, DNA replication. When a cell divides to form a new cell, the DNA, all of the DNA from the mother cell, must be replicated perfectly for the daughter cell. And vitamin B12 plays an important role in this process. Now, vitamin B12 is also involved in the maintenance of the covering of nerve cells called the myelin sheath. Now, myelin helps with the propagation of nervous system signals through neurons, and in a vitamin B12 deficiency, that myelin can become disrupted, leading to certain neurologic symptoms. Vitamin B12 is also involved in serotonin production. Now, serotonin is a neurotransmitter or brain biochemical involved in creating the moods of happiness. Now, vitamin B12 also keeps homocysteine levels appropriately low, and homocysteine is related to heart disease, and vitamin B12 breaks it down. Homocysteine is also a vitamin B12 test, which Dr. Rick will share more about shortly. Now, I know that vitamin B12 is a huge topic of conversation in the raw food, vegan, and plant-based communities, but I like to mention that vitamin B12 deficiency is not just an issue for vegans, vegetarians, and raw foodists. And my classic example is the Framingham Offspring Study. This study was published in the year 2000, so this information is not new. It's been around for quite some time, and it's well understood. In this study, there were almost 3,000 people, and 39% of them were in the low normal or deficient range for vitamin B12. And what was fascinating about this study was that the study participants were not vegan, vegetarian, or raw foodists. They were all omnivores. They were all eating animal products. Now, this surprises people, because oftentimes animal foods are thought to be good or reliable sources of vitamin B12. But this study shows us otherwise. Vitamin B12 is a concern for everybody. I tend to be more concerned about vitamin B12 with meat eaters than with vegans, because vegans tend to be well educated about vitamin B12. Now, very often I'm asked about food sources of vitamin B12 and how reliable they are. Are fermented foods a good source of vitamin B12? And what about seaweed? Can these foods have vitamin B12 in them? And the answer is that some fermented foods have vitamin B12, but not all. Fermented foods are not considered to be a reliable source of B12. Since vitamin B12 is made by certain types of bacteria, the fermentation mixture would have to contain this bacteria, which is not reliably the case, unfortunately. Now, most studies I've seen have shown that fermented foods are just not a reliable source of vitamin B12. And the same is true for sea vegetables. Studies I've seen that were done on nori seaweed revealed that freshly harvested nori contains human bioactive vitamin B12. But once the nori has been dried, the human bioactive vitamin B12 is converted into B12 analogs, which are molecules that look like vitamin B12 but don't have the same activity in the human body, unfortunately. And rehydrating the nori does not reactivate vitamin B12. This is likely where some of the confusion with vitamin B12 and sea vegetables come from. Now, what about the vitamin B12 that lives in our intestines? Can we utilize that vitamin B12? That's a really good question. Well, let's take a look at our stylized picture here of the human digestive tract. This green structure here is our large intestine. Of course, it's not green in real life, but that's what we're seeing here in this picture. Now, vitamin B12 producing bacteria can live in our large intestine. So if that vitamin B12 producing bacteria produces B12, can we utilize it? The answer to that is unfortunately not, because vitamin B12 is absorbed in the last part of our small intestine, called our distal ileum. And unfortunately, the contents of our intestine tend to not travel backwards. So what's in the large intestine isn't going to travel backwards into the small intestine, unfortunately, in the case of vitamin B12. Everything in our digestive tract moves in one direction. And in addition to that, there is a valve between the large and small intestine here called the ileocecal valve, and that prevents backflow as well. So unfortunately, even though our large intestine can have the bacteria that produces vitamin B12, unfortunately, that vitamin B12 does not make it to the last part of the small intestine, the distal ileum, where it can be absorbed. So unfortunately, we can't utilize that vitamin B12. Now, another thing I'd like to mention here is duckweed. Now, duckweed is also referred to as water lentil and mankai. So it goes by a few different names. So duckweed, water lentil, and mankai. Sometimes you'll hear a couple of these names used together. Sometimes you'll hear just one. And It's essentially three names for the same organism, and it's gained a lot of popularity in the last few years. I just wanted to clarify, though, that water lentil here is not the same as the legume that we know of as lentils. As you can see here, water lentil is an aquatic plant and is probably called water lentil because of its resemblance to the lentil legume that we know of so well. Now, as you can see here, duckweed is a very small oval-shaped aquatic plant. It's often touted as being a reliable source of vitamin B12. In fact, here is a study that found 4 different forms of vitamin B12 in duckweed extracts. And no vitamin B12 analogs were detected in this study. So this is interesting. Now, this information looks pretty convincing though, right? Well, I question this study because of these 4 different forms of vitamin B12, hydroxycobalamin, methylcobalamin, cyanocobalamin, and deoxyadenosylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin is the only one that's reliably found in nature, and cyanocobalamin is exclusively made in a lab. So because of this, I think that the Mankai duckweed water lentil extracts assayed in this study may have been fortified with these vitamin B12 forms. Now, I look forward to more studies shedding light on this situation, but for now, I question the reliability of duckweed water lentil Mankai as a source of vitamin B12. Now, let's take a closer look at the different forms of vitamin B12. There are several different forms of vitamin B12 available in supplements, and here's a sampling. So, methylcobalamin, cyanocobalamin, and hydroxycobalamin. As we mentioned earlier, hydroxycobalamin is the form of vitamin B12 that's made by bacteria in nature. But it's not a human bioactive form. So if someone eats a food with hydroxycobalamin in it or takes the hydroxycobalamin supplement, the body takes the hydroxy portion off the molecule and then replaces it with a methyl group, for example, which activates it since methylcobalamin is a human bioactive form of vitamin B12. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, cyanocobalamin is one of the most common supplemental forms. It has a long shelf life, so supplement manufacturers like to make it because it can sit on a shelf for years and still actually work. When someone takes a cyanocobalamin supplement, their body will remove the cyano group and replace it with a methyl group to activate it. So both cyanocobalamin and hydroxycobalamin can be converted to a human bioactive form. Now, methylcobalamin is already human bioactive in the form that you get from supplements. So what do we use? We use methylcobalamin, which we've been using for years and have experienced good results. Another form of vitamin B12 that I'd like to mention here is known as adenosylcobalamin, also pronounced adenosylcobalamin. Sometimes you'll see it spelled as 5'-deoxyadenosylcobalamin or just deoxyadenosylcobalamin. It is a human bioactive form of vitamin B12, and we're starting to see more of it in supplemental form. Now, in the body, it's the storage form of vitamin B12. So when vitamin B12 is stored in your liver, it is stored in this particular form. It's also involved in energy production and helps to keep methylmalonic acid levels appropriately low. So today we've covered 4 of the main forms of vitamin B12. And one way to know if your vitamin B12 supplement is working or if you're getting enough from your diet is to get a vitamin B12 test, which Dr. Rick will explain next.
There are several tests available that can help you determine your vitamin B12 status. Now, each one has its own set of considerations, so it's not just a one-size-fits-all situation. We'll start in the same place we did with iron testing, the complete blood count. Now, first of all, B12 is needed to activate folate. Folate is involved in new cell formation. I mentioned in the iron section that we have 25 trillion red blood cells in our body, and every 4 months, you have all new red blood cells. So your body has to make 25 trillion new red blood cells every 4 months. If you don't have enough B12 to activate folate to stimulate new cells growing, you can't have enough red blood cells. So you'll end up with a low red blood cell count, which you can then go and see on the complete blood count. Now, it gets a little more interesting in people who eat large quantities of fresh fruits and vegetables. So what happens there is a small percentage of the folate we consume is already in the activated form. And like we said, you need vitamin B12 to activate folate. But if you eat large quantities of folate, like you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, far more than the average person, the small percentage of that folate that's already activated can actually be high enough that you can still form those new red blood cells and still have a decent red blood cell count, even if you're low in vitamin B12. Now, on the one hand, that sounds good because you don't become anemic. But on the other hand, you don't have that as a indicator that you're low in B12. And so you get a false sense of security there, because what comes down the road are neurological deficits, and they're way more severe than becoming anemic, and they are sometimes actually irreversible. And I've seen a few case histories of that that are extremely unfortunate. So, now, MTHFR testing can come in with that as well, but that gets a little bit beyond the scope. So the complete blood count is not necessarily, in my opinion, the recommended way to check for vitamin B12 status. Next, we can take a look at vitamin B12 itself. It measures vitamin B12 directly in the blood. Now, some people have an issue with this test because they say, oh, B12 analogs can throw it off. But if you're not consuming large quantities of things like spirulina and chlorella, then this test is perfectly fine. If you're not bringing analogs in and this test is testing B12, then it's testing actual vitamin B12. So homocysteine and methylmalonic acid that we'll talk about next, they do not distinguish between adequate amounts of B12 and potentially excessive amounts of B12, whereas vitamin B12 directly can. So if you're over supplementing, for example, this test can tell you that you can cut back and save some money and have fewer plastic bottles floating around in the oceans and those other places. So it's very, very useful in that regard. And it's also relatively inexpensive. So if you know what you're looking at, it can be very, very useful. So I'm a big fan of serum vitamin B12. Next, we get into the fancier ones. One of them is known as homocysteine. And homocysteine is an amino acid that is pro-inflammatory to blood vessels when its levels rise. And inflammation of the blood vessels is actually one of the major risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Even if you eat a low-fat, high-fiber diet and you have low cholesterol, if you've got inflammation in your blood vessels, that is putting you at risk, and you don't want that. So the major nutrients that keep homocysteine levels low are vitamins B12, B6, and folate. So if homocysteine is elevated, you don't necessarily know which one of those nutrients are low. That's why it's not the most specific test for vitamin B12. On the other hand, though, if homocysteine is low, you know that all of those nutrients, including vitamin B12, are sufficient. So again, if your homocysteine's low, you know you're in good shape for B12. If your homocysteine's low, you know you're in good shape for folate. Even if you have one of the MTHFR variants, you might be eating enough fruits and vegetables to compensate for that. And so homocysteine is a really good marker for that as well. Now, however, unlike B12 itself, homocysteine does not distinguish between adequate versus excessive levels of vitamin B12 like B12 directly does. So got that covered. And finally, we'll look at methylmalonic acid. And under certain circumstances, it is the most accurate test for vitamin B12 status because it is specific for B12. B12 is the only thing that affects methylmalonic acid. If you're taking a bunch of B12 analogs, if you like spirulina, for example, and the B12 test says your B12 is high, those analogs don't function like B12 and they will not fool the methylmalonic acid test. Methylmalonic acid will be elevated. So methylmalonic acid is a really good test. It's a little more expensive than some of the other ones. It's a lot more expensive actually than vitamin B12 directly. So I don't always use it because I can tell what's going on otherwise. But when a patient wants to see it, or if they've come to me with that test, it's always good to look at. Methylmalonic acid can be a very useful test for your vitamin B12 status. So there you have a quick but relatively thorough overview of some of the key tests used to determine your vitamin B12 status. Now that we've finished the educational content for this webinar, we'll move on to take a look at our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum. In today's webinar, we covered just a tiny sampling of what we have to offer in this area. So for those of you wishing to continue your education with us, you may want to consider our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive curriculum. It's a one-year program, and the next program starts on September 1st, 2021. We recommend a time commitment of 4 to 5 hours per week. If you had 2 to 3, that would be reasonable, but if you can commit 4 to 5, that will really allow you to get the most out of the curriculum, which is what we want for all of you. So for those of you willing to put in a few hours a week for an entire year, we understand that's a big commitment. And of course, to cover the financial commitment, you can dramatically increase your chances for success, and we make the learning process fun while we're at it. First, we'll look at some of the topics that we cover in the course, and then we'll go into how it is delivered. So first of all, we have a gigantic array of topics that are covered in the curriculum. Pretty much everything important that you ever wanted to know about plant-based and raw food nutrition, based on our decades of personal research, course development, education, and clinical experience in this field. Now, we cover so much: energy healing and calorie density, basics of nutrition, blood sugar regulation. Each one of these thumbnails is about 2 hours of a segment for each week. Raw food sources and nutrients, calcium and vitamin D, vitamin B12, essential fats, acid-alkaline balance, cleansing and detoxification, not just philosophy, but real science. Where do you get your protein? Essentials of human digestion, enzymes, longevity and youth extension, where we look at long-lived people and cellular mechanisms, and we put 2 and 2 together. Health Statistics 1 and 2, the history of raw and living foods. We look at the different camps and we understand where they're coming from, where they agree with each other, where they disagree, and why we see disagreements today. You know, it's just follows the logical chain of events. Raw 2 approaches, foundations of the raw food diet, food combining, raw food weight loss, classic studies in support of plant-based nutrition. This is a 2-week section, covers about 4 hours. We look at McDougall, PCRM, Framingham Heart Study, Ornish, Esselstyn, the China study, so much of the classic plant-based nutrition studies. Then we go on to describe that when we cook certain foods, depending on the cooking method, we actually form carcinogens. But we tell you how to avoid those even if you're not completely raw. Then Dr. Karen talks about the effects of heating on food from a nutrient perspective. We look at organic versus non-organic. Now, please keep in mind that anyone can come up with a list of topics that sounds impressive, but the question is, how much experience do they have in these areas, and how much experience do they have educating others? We have an awful lot of that. So some other topics we cover: Grains and plant families. Dr. Karen mentioned that her second undergrad degree was in molecular biology, and she studied all this stuff about plant families. And when we look at grains and different plant foods, that actually helps to explain why certain plant foods are rich in certain nutrients depending on which family they are in. Making sense of food labels, psychological factors of health and healing, candida, DHA, xenoestrogens, and phytoestrogens, water fasting and juice fasting, where we get some of my clinical experience from True North involved. A survey of superfoods and supplements. Dr. Karen looks at the real peer-reviewed research literature and compares that with the marketing claims of various superfoods, and we sort of learn who's naughty and who's nice, who's telling the truth and who's making exaggerated claims, so you can have the information to make excellent decisions. Raw food sources of nutrients expanded, raw food exaggerations. The history of human food choices. Did meat get our big brains? Was it starches? Was it fruit? Dr. Karen examines the literature of those competing theories and gives a fair assessment. The big question of animal products. Do we need them? The importance of sleep. That and psychological factors and the autonomic nervous system that you'll see in the next slide are three of our not directly nutritionally related topics, but they operate together with, and sometimes nutrition happens underneath their umbrella. So some other important things to look at to round out the entire picture. Menu planning for various health challenges, an expanded view of carbohydrates, more about weight loss. Sweeteners. We don't recommend sweeteners, but some people like to make a few fancy things. It's good to know what's going on so you can make the best choices about what to put in your recipes. Importance of hydration, research and support of raw food nutrition. This is another 2-week section where we study what's going on and understand things to help us make sense. Nutrient analyses of various plant foods, and then the next week, various sample diets. Really starts to put things together to see what type of dietary approaches are the most complete and which ones just make claims but don't really add up. So we look at a standard modern diet, we look at a paleo diet, we look at a starch-centered plant-based diet, we look at a couple of different raw food diets, and we really see what's going on. Then we take that model and specifically look at the fatty acid profile, first of different foods, then of different diets, with special emphasis on omega-3 conversion, including many case histories of long-term plant-based eaters, including many raw foodists, who have been my patients over the years, who I have studied. So that's part of where my clinical practice and experience makes its way into the curriculum. We have some more. Survey of superfoods. Let me let those come out one at a time. More superfoods and supplements. An overview of energy. Gosh, that's where Dr. Karen looks at all the pathways of where carbohydrates and fat and protein can go, but translates it into English so it all makes sense. Sea vegetables. What we call advanced functions of dietary fiber that leads into probiotics and prebiotics, so you will have an extremely solid foundation to speak with anybody with authority about probiotics and the human microbiome. The pleasure trap, the work of Drs. Doug Lyle and Alan Goldhammer, so critically important. As I mentioned earlier, the autonomic nervous system, and then overcoming challenges and pitfalls in plant-based and raw food nutrition. This actually covers about a week and a half. At this point, we are done with our third out of our fourth notebook, and this is an overview section that also brings some new information into play and takes a look at where people can go wrong, where they can make mistakes, and why that causes them to no longer be vegan anymore. More than once, it's happened that during this section and during some other sections of the class, our students have been looking on YouTube and seeing who's defecting from the plant-based movement. And they're like, oh my God, if they had only taken this class and understood this, they could stay in the movement instead of leaving it. It just brings a lot together. And then we start on our educator material. And about 20% of our students wish to go on and educate others. About 10% are already doing so and want to refine and learn more and have more confidence and be able to help people more effectively and answer their questions more effectively so they have more confidence in them. And the other 10% are on their path doing that, starting out by getting educated with us first and then going on. So for the other 80%, we haven't forgotten about those students. A lot of this material comes in so handy when your friends and your family members and your coworkers are asking you questions about your diet. We have several weeks where we just practice answering hundreds of different questions that you might get asked about these things and how to handle those with grace and elegance rather than being on the defensive and being antagonistic about things. And that aspect of plant-based eating, being different from the rest of the world, when you can navigate the unhealthy world successfully, that helps us be healthier. That helps us have more confidence in interacting with other people. And so that really near the end there ties a whole bunch of things together. Dr. Karen talks about how to continue to research on your own after the course is over, tips and tricks that she learned as a research assistant and she's been doing on her own for 15 or so years now. Things like putting this class together. And then we finish off with seeing the big picture of health and the raw health continuum. So by the time our students complete this course, their level of understanding and confidence in a whole food plant-based diet with a foundation of raw fruits and vegetables is at an extremely high level. Over and over again, they tell us how much they appreciate our thorough and unbiased approach. And our position is all you have to do is tell the truth, and the benefits of plant-based nutrition are naturally revealed. No outrageous claims, nothing crazy, just amazing health supporting results. So before going on, I just wanted to share one quick case history from a student of ours in our 2019-2020 class. And she says, "Hi, I'm Danny, and I love the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition course. I have learned so much about the benefits of raw and living food that has improved my own knowledge of nutrition, and I've been able to help others now as well. I have a solid foundation of nutrition now to bring into my traditional medical practice." Danny actually has several advanced nursing degrees. "The program definitely over-delivers content and brings up subjects that I didn't even think of, but truly found interesting. Thank you, Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen, for taking the time to put all of this together in a way that makes sense and makes it totally applicable to implement right away." So we're always honored to hear things like this. We love having other healthcare providers in class with us. Typically about 10% of our students are healthcare providers, and some even have advanced degrees like medical doctors and people with PhDs, several nurses, some of our chiropractic, naturopathic colleagues, etc. So how do we deliver this to get students to that point? So first of all, there are about 2 hours per week of professional quality videos, similar to what you're seeing here on this webinar. Now you can watch these videos at your own schedule. They're available 24/7 as long as you're connected to the internet. Once they are released each week, they stay there for the rest of the course, so you can always review, and you can watch them as many times as you want. They are 2 hours is typically broken down into maybe 4 or 5, 20 or 30-minute segments, so you can chunk things down accordingly and fit them into your schedule. Now, every hour that our students see, and including what you see in the educational part of this webinar, typically takes us a full-time week to put together, even with our background and experience, to read a bunch of research, to put it all together, to make sense out of everything, to make charts and graphs and figure out how to deliver it in a way that's understandable is a huge amount of effort. You can save yourself years and decades of time by utilizing what we have to offer, so we make extremely efficient use of your time. Now, also, we just recently added a couple of years ago the audio version of those weekly videos. So you can listen to those on your own schedule, same things as many times as you want. And oftentimes when people are driving or exercising or multitasking, you want to bring your phone with you. You don't have necessarily a laptop, or you can't see everything on a phone screen anyway, although most of them are pretty high resolution that day. You can still do pretty well. But if you want to make it easier and just listen and save a lot of mobile data, we have the audio MP3s available as well. Now, along with the videos, we have very comprehensive notebooks. We have 4 of those that we send you throughout the year. It's about 900 pages worth of notes, and there are thousands of scientific references in the back that we used in order to put this curriculum together. Now, what these notes are not is they are not transcripts. We know a lot of people with online courses just say, oh yeah, we've got notes for you. They have some software, make a transcript, and everything you said is written out in paragraph form. I remember seeing those once, and it said, I need some water, because they were clearing their throat and they didn't edit that out. That's not what these notes are. These are in charts and graphs and bullet points to lay everything out logically, to complement what you see in the educational videos, so you don't have to distract your focus trying to write everything down. You can pay attention to what you're seeing on the screen, and you may want to write a few other things in your notes or hit pause every now and then, but for the most part, those notes are there and they really help enhance the learning process. They are also lifetime reference material. So years after the course is over, you have all of this information available at your fingertips. We're going to take a quick look at some of the pages. So here we have some tables and some various things. It doesn't say proof and have our watermark behind it in the actual notes. We have some, you can see the charts and everything else. Here's some other information. You see all the graphics, and there's some information about protein, for example. Now, what we also do is if we can see here, if I'm lined up, we print the name of the course on the spine of these. So when you've got them lined up in your notebook, they are all ready to go. Once again, a lifetime of reference material at your fingertips. Okay, so then we have weekly quizzes that are interactive. So after you go through the videos for that week, you can take a 5-question typically quiz. You answer, and then it tells you if you're right or wrong, and then it gives you an explanation of what's going on with that question to help enhance the learning process. Then once you're done with all that, it gives you all 5 questions and the explanations. Takes about 10 minutes or so to go through that. You can retake it as many times as you want. We just implemented that for our current year's class, and thus far it looks like it's going really well because our students are taking advantage of that, again, to enhance the learning process. Now, all of that thus far is on your own, but we don't leave you hanging. 6 to 8 times per month, we have live video conferences. They're on Tuesdays at 2 different times. You can see the times here. So no matter where you are in the world and what type of schedule you have, it's likely that one of these times will work for you. So when there are 3 Tuesdays per month, which is typical, there's 6 conferences, occasionally there's 4, and then there's 8 conferences. So with those, you come on video conferences, you interact. If it's my topic for that week, you'll be interacting with me live. If it's Dr. Karen's, you'll be interacting with her. Sometimes we are both there. So you can raise your hand visually or by hitting the raise hand icon and ask us questions directly, or you can type questions in either during the call in the chat, or if these times don't work, either all the time or occasionally, you can always type your questions in advance of the call. We've got it very easy. We've got it set up so it's very easy to do that. And then what we do is we go back and forth between questions written in and live questions on those conferences, and we audio record each of them and save them back to the course site, so you can always go listen to the recording and then hear the answers to your questions, as well as the questions and our answers from your fellow students. So that's very, very handy. Also, for the first 4 years teaching this class online, we had a Facebook group. This current year and continuing on, we now actually have private groups within the course. So there are no privacy issues, there's no ads, there's no things that you don't want to see in there. And we've actually broken it down into a social group where you can get to know your fellow students, you can post recipes, you can talk about how the holidays went and the challenges with some of your relatives, or some success stories of eating healthfully, you're off your medication, your A1C is down, whatever the case may be. And then we also have a separate study group. And in the study group, typically, sometimes we'll get a really good question on our live conferences, and we will sometimes look up some articles and give some links and then put those in the study group to help enhance answering students' questions and making sense out of everything. A couple of our quotes from recent students. Susan from California says, "This class is incredibly beneficial and beautifully taught." Sam from New York says, "I have taken many courses in plant-based nutrition and hold certifications from many different health institutions. However, there is none that I hold in higher regard than the one I will receive from Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. It is the most detailed, scientific, and complete program from any I have taken. From all the courses I have taken, this is the one I recommend for serious nutrition enthusiasts." Now, one of those courses that Sam took was the plant-based nutrition course from eCornell, which we also hold in very high esteem. And what Sam has said is typical of many eCornell graduates who have joined us. They said they loved eCornell, they loved the scientific rigor and the validity and the solidness and credibility of everything in that course. And then, we tell them, we're very much the same way in how we teach, and that if they want to learn more topics and have an emphasis on fruits and vegetables and go into more depth and detail, that we are the logical next step. So we're honored when eCornell graduates join us to continue their learning process. And Sam and his family are up to some really cool stuff about healthy eating and sustainable living and teaching other people how to do that in upstate New York. So it is a true honor when people like him join us to help enhance them on their journeys, making the world a better place. A couple of things about exposure versus cohesion. Dr. Karen has about 3/4 or so of a naturopathic medical degree. She finished a chiropractic school. She did just a summer preceptorship at True North. I was there for 4 years. So we bring different things to the table, but at the same time, we think of things in a very similar way, and we are a married couple, both who have doctorate degrees, so there's a great amount of cohesiveness to the information as well. So this isn't one of these courses where we just have, this person talk about this talk about this. In a way, that's good because they each have expertise in one area, but we have a very broad perspective on all this, and in many areas, we also have a lot of depth. So we're really able to put everything together in a cohesive whole. There's a lot of synergy, and it's a real winning combination. And we're total nerds, so it's fun for us, And I think that comes across to a lot of our students. So before we wrap up and summarize how the course works, a couple of other testimonials from our students. Tim in Tennessee says, I've learned a tremendous amount from this course, and it revolutionized my eating life. The science was detailed, fascinating, and life-changing. Though I am not 100% raw yet, he says, I have moved far in that direction based on what I learned. Plus now I have the least damaging ways to cook foods and have completely converted to using only those approaches when I do cook. The video lessons were all fun and informative, and the conferences warm and immensely helpful. I learned a ton from the other students as well. I am so glad I took this course. He said in another part of our survey, great course, so useful and life-changing, loved the depth of science. And Tim was one of those students. He was there at every conference asking excellent questions, was really into it, and we can see how much of a difference it makes. Like any other endeavor, the more you put in, the more you get out. And like with Sam and our other students, are just honored to have been able to share that with Tim and make a real difference in his life. And by the way, we have so many good testimonials that if you go to our website, rawfoodeducation.com, and click on the testimonials, even though we'd love to put them all in here in the interest of time, we're just putting a few of them in there, but you can read a lot more there. The last one we'll share in this webinar here is from Annette in the UK. And she said, I had high expectations of this course when I started, as I took the course with my husband, had already seen some of the work of Drs. Rick and Karen, and I have to say, my high expectations have been well and truly exceeded. Many other online courses feel anonymous with a sense of distance from the course provider. This is far from the case with Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. Drs. Rick and Karen get to know their students despite the physical distance. They are responsive, interested, and approachable. And by the way, when Annette and her husband took the course, we didn't even have live video conferencing yet. We were on more of a conference call where everyone could hear us and we could hear them, but there wasn't the visual, so it's even better now. She goes on to say, this is the best study decision I have taken since studying for my degree in the 1980s. That one had a profound impact on my future, and this one is highly likely to do the same. There is rigor and depth to this course, all of which is conveyed in such a way that a non-scientist such as me is able to understand it and assimilate it for later use. For anyone interested in really learning about plant-based nutrition, I can recommend this course unreservedly. And we really do go out of our way to have scientific rigor, but to translate it into English as well to make sure that you understand it. That's the goal, because then you're empowered to go out and make a difference in your life. So to summarize here, we have 2 hours worth of professional video educational videos per week, as well as the audio-only versions for those of you who are so inclined. We have thoughtfully designed notebooks to go along with each subject and that cover the whole course, lifetime reference material there. We have those weekly interactive quizzes. We have near weekly live video conference every Tuesday, except the last Tuesday of the month. And we have private, social, and study groups, and all of it is designed to give you the knowledge and confidence to keep on track and make the best decisions, to give you a lifetime of supercharged health. We want to thank you so much for joining us today.
We'll be sending you an email shortly where we invite those of you really excited about the course to speak with us to help determine if Mastering Raw Food Nutrition is a good fit for you. You can also click on the schedule link that's on your screen right now. Now we're going to take a 5-minute intermission, and then we'll be back to answer questions about the course and plant-based and raw food nutrition. In the meantime, please feel free to sign up for a time to speak with us. We look forward to speaking with you soon.